Welcome to part 2 of your video lesson on the Roman Republic and how it developed into an empire. We're going to start with some problems in the Republic following the Punic Wars. Plebeian farmers were unable to compete against large farming states and went out of business. Whenever you have economic problems, people start to question their leaders because they're poor and they don't have enough food and enough resources, and that leads for them to rebel in a lot of cases. The unemployed moved into cities, but enslaved people there did most of the work. A bread and circuses policy was used to try to calm rebellions. And that refers to the entertainment that was provided. So the Roman leaders kind of figured, well, if people are poor, let's distract them from that with some entertainment. And if you've seen famous movies about like gladiators in Rome and what happened in the Colosseum where people were being fed to lions and tigers, like that refers to the bread and circuses policy. Plebeians joined armies as paid soldiers and pledged loyalty to army generals, who ended up gaining more power than the government. This led to a general named Sulla naming himself as dictator of Rome. Without that kind of selfless power that Cincinnatus had, this was more for his own power. Conflict in Rome raged for the next 50 years. The cycle of poverty can be really damaging in any part of the world, and this shows a little bit about how it affected Roman society. As the Roman Empire continued to grow, wealthy Romans began to seize captured lands. Farmers began to fall into poverty and debt. While fighting in the wars for Roman expansion, they neglected their farms or had their farms destroyed by the Carthaginians, and that led to them being unable to pay their taxes or loans. Poor farmers moved to the city to find work. Once again, most were not able to find jobs because prisoners were also working there, or because they had only farming jobs and not those skills that were suited for these urban jobs. Wealthy Romans bought up the small farms, combined them into these large estates called latifundias. They used prisoners from their conquests as cheap or free form of labor to run the latifundias, now growing cash crops. Prisoners took most of the jobs that the farmers could have had. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer. The gap continued to widen. This is going to lead to the downfall of the Roman Republic. People start to crave a stronger government, stronger leadership to help solve their problems and take care of them because they felt so insecure from this system of poverty. This leads to the rise of Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar formed a partnership with two other army generals to rule Rome called the First Triumvirate. After the death of one of the members of the Triumvirate, Caesar used his army to gain control of all of Italy and declared himself dictator for life. He brought peace and reforms to Rome, creating more jobs, granting citizenship, and designing a 365-day calendar. Caesar's enemies, led by Senators Cassius and Brutus, feared his growing power and killed him. We'll go much more in depth into this. This is really just the cliff notes of kind of like a really interesting and controversial historical event. Here's one of the more famous things you might have seen. This is an image recreated, obviously, of the senators stabbing Caesar on the Senate floor. But that phrase, et tu, Brute, it's used a lot in popular culture when addressing a disloyal person or an unexpected traitor. It's not necessarily historically accurate, but it means, and you too, Brutus. So people often use it to express shock or disappointment in a betrayal. Caesar's nephew Octavian and two army generals won the civil war that broke out after Caesar's death and formed the Second Triumvirate in 43 BC. This again leads to a more power struggle. Octavian and Mark Antony, destroy the Triumvirate with their power struggles, leading to Octavian becoming the supreme ruler of Rome and the end of the Roman Republic. Many Romans favored a representative republic as taught by Cicero, but Octavian persuaded the Roman Senate to give him complete power. He became the first emperor of Rome and took the title Caesar Augustus. This is the start of the Roman Empire. Augustus brought an era of peace to Rome called Pax Romana, which lasted nearly 200 years. And that term Pax refers to peace, Roman peace. The Roman Empire was divided into provinces, each with its own governor, and borders were established along natural physical features. Augustus created a permanent army of 150,000 soldiers, developed programs to help poor people, and reformed Rome's legal system and tax laws. But after Augustus' death, some emperors governed the Roman Empire effectively, but others were cruel. Rome's also really famous for its architecture and its buildings. You remember images of the Colosseum is one of them. This one is the Theater of Marcellus, the Forum of Augustus, and the Roman Colosseum. It opened in AD 80. It was begun by the Emperor Vespasian and completed by his son Titus. Its opening ceremony lasted 100 days. During this time, great contests and even a recreation of a recreation of a sea battle took place, for which the entire arena was filled with water. The massive stadium could hold about 50,000 people. Seats at the top were for plebeians, and seats near the stages were reserved for patricians. During the Middle Ages, pieces of the Colosseum were used to build a Barberini palace and other structures. It was almost torn down in the 1500s, but was saved as a sacred monument by Pope Benedict in the 1700s. This is a list of just some of the Roman emperors. There were many: Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Although the tragic eruption of Mount Vesuvius ended thousands of lives, the ash that buried Pompeii served as sort of a mummification for the entire city. The eruption of AD 79, which buried the town in choking ash, allowed to capture a moment in time, not unlike an eerie snapshot of a terrible scene. Under the ash, everything remained as it was the exact moment of eruption. Artwork was preserved, buildings were preserved, several important clues were left behind. These clues give us a rare view into the past. Vesuvius, which is this volcano here, shown looming over the ruins of ancient Pompeii, is the only active volcano on the mainland of Europe, and that has caused some of the continent's largest and most spectacular eruptions. And here's an image of some of that buried treasure that is left from the eruption. Another famous Roman technological innovation is the aqueducts. They're pictured here. The word aqueduct is formed by the two word roots aqua, water, and duct, to lead. Aqueducts are channels that carry water from higher ground to places such as large cities on lower ground. They are built to flow downhill to use gravity to move water. Aqueducts are still used to move water today. One major modern aqueduct brings fresh water to Los Angeles in the United States. Ancient Roman aqueducts were major feats of engineering and a significant contribution to the world technology. The aqueduct shown here is the Pont du Gard in modern-day southern France, which was once part of the Roman Empire. The 3 rows of arches tower at over 150 feet. Built by the son-in-law of Emperor Augustus in about 19 BC, it spans the Gard River and flows for more than 31 miles. This map shows some of the trade routes along the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire was huge, so different routes were needed to trade with different parts of the world and to trade resources such as glassware, grain, horses, marble, metals, olive oil, perfume, silk, spices, timber, wild animals, wine, wool. Thank you for listening to a brief history of the Roman Republic and Roman Empire. We'll go more in depth into some of these concepts throughout the unit, but I'm glad that you guys have some main points of this really interesting and detailed history.